The story of Rome's beginning is, like many foundation myths, a tangled web of legend, violence, and divine intervention. The Romans themselves loved to tell the tale of Romulus and Remus, the twin sons of the god Mars, and a Vestal virgin named Rhea Silvia. This parentage immediately set them apart, linking them to both divine power and earthly royalty. Their granduncle, the usurping king Amulius, feared the prophecy that they would one day overthrow him. He ordered the infants to be cast into the river Tiber, a death sentence designed to look like an accident of nature. But fate, or perhaps the gods, had a different plan for the boys who were destined to found a world-changing city. Miraculously, the basket carrying the twins did not sink but washed ashore at the foot of the Palatine Hill. Here the story takes its most famous turn. A she-wolf, a creature sacred to Mars, discovered the crying infants. Instead of harming them, she was moved by a maternal instinct and nursed them with her own milk, saving them from certain starvation. This powerful image of a wolf suckling human babies became an enduring symbol of Rome itself, a city nurtured by the wild, destined for a fierce and resilient existence. Later, a shepherd named Faustulus found the boys and, with his wife, raised them as their own sons, unaware of their noble and divine origins. As young men, Romulus and Remus grew into natural leaders, strong and charismatic, their true lineage shining through their humble upbringing. After discovering their identity, they fulfilled their destiny by returning to their ancestral home of Alba Longa, killing the tyrant Amulius and restoring their grandfather, Numitor, to the throne. But they were not content to simply be princes in an established city. They decided to found a new city of their own, near the very spot where they had been saved by the she-wolf. This decision, born of ambition and a desire to forge their own path, would ultimately set them against each other in a fatal conflict. The brothers quarreled over the precise location and, more importantly, who should rule their new city. To settle the dispute, they turned to augury, the practice of interpreting divine will through the flight of birds. Remus saw 6 vultures first, but Romulus then saw 12, claiming a superior sign from the gods. In a fit of jealous rage over the newly built walls of Romulus's chosen site on the Palatine Hill, Remus mocked their low height by leaping over them. An enraged Romulus struck his brother down, declaring, "So perish all who ever leap over my walls." This fratricide, committed on 21 April 753 BCE, became the bloody and ominous founding act of Rome, a stark reminder that power and ambition were baked into the city's very foundations from its first day. With Remus dead, Romulus became the first of Rome's 7 legendary kings. He was a warrior king focused on expanding his city's population and territory. His first challenge was a shortage of women, which he solved through a notorious act known as the Rape of the Sabine Women. He invited the neighbouring Sabine tribe to a festival, only to have his men abduct their unmarried daughters. This act of treachery led to a fierce war, which was famously ended when the Sabine women themselves, now wives and mothers, ran between the battle lines, begging their fathers and husbands to stop fighting. The war ended in a truce, and the Sabines merged with the Romans, doubling the city's size and strength. Following Romulus, a succession of 6 other kings ruled Rome, each contributing something different to its development. The period of the Roman kingdom lasted for nearly 2.5 centuries, from 753 to 509 BCE. During this time, what began as a small collection of hilltop villages transformed into a proper city with significant public works and institutions. Kings like Numa Pompilius were known for establishing religious customs and the Roman calendar, bringing a sense of order and piety to the warlike people. Other kings expanded Rome's influence over its Latin neighbours through conquest and diplomacy, slowly but surely laying the groundwork for its future dominance in the Italian peninsula. The growth of the city brought with it a more complex social structure. The early Romans were organized into clans or gentes, and a council of elders known as the Senate was created to advise the king. This body was initially composed of the heads of the most prominent families. The kings held supreme military, executive, and judicial authority, but they did not operate in a vacuum. They had to manage their relationship with this emerging aristocracy. The later kings, particularly those from the Etruscan dynasty, were great builders. They are credited with draining the swampy lowlands to create the Roman Forum, constructing the first sewer system, the Cloaca Maxima, and building grand temples, turning Rome into a major urban centre. The seventh and final king, Lucius Tarquinius Superbus, or Tarquin the Proud, embodied the dangers of absolute power. He came to the throne through violence, murdering his predecessor, and ruled as a tyrant. He ignored the Senate, used forced labour for his ambitious building projects, and terrorised the Roman elite with executions and the confiscation of their property. While he expanded Roman territory and completed major public works, his cruelty and arrogance fostered deep resentment among his people. His reign demonstrated to the Romans the fundamental flaws of monarchy, where the fate of the entire city rested in the hands of one man who could easily become corrupt and despotic. This growing discontent would soon erupt into open rebellion. As Rome grew from a small settlement into a bustling city under the kings, its society became increasingly stratified. Two distinct social classes emerged, and the division between them would define Roman politics for centuries: the patricians and the plebeians. The patricians were the elite, the aristocracy of early Rome. They were members of the original most powerful families who claimed descent from the first senators appointed by Romulus. Their name, derived from the Latin patra, or fathers, signified their role as the founding fathers of the state. They controlled almost all the wealth, owned most of the land, and held a monopoly on political power and religious offices. In stark contrast were the plebeians, who made up the vast majority of the Roman population. This group was incredibly diverse, including everyone from small-scale farmers, labourers and artisans to merchants, and even some wealthy individuals who lacked the prestigious lineage of the patricians. Despite their numbers and their vital role in the economy and the army, the plebeians had virtually no political rights. They could not hold public office, could not become priests, and were initially forbidden from marrying patricians. They were citizens, but second-class ones, subject to the laws and decisions made exclusively by the patrician elite who governed the city for their own benefit. This rigid social hierarchy was a source of constant tension. The patricians viewed themselves as inherently superior, the rightful guardians of Roman tradition and the state. They used their control of the Senate and the legal system to protect their privileged position, often exploiting the plebeians. For example, laws regarding debt were incredibly harsh. A plebeian farmer who fell into debt to a patrician landowner could lose his farm, be forced into servitude, or even be sold into slavery. This economic vulnerability, combined with their complete political exclusion, created a simmering resentment among the common people who felt they were being oppressed by a system they had no power to change. The struggle between these two orders, known as the conflict of the orders, was not simply about wealth. It was a fight for fundamental rights and a voice in government. The plebeians knew that they were the backbone of Rome. They were the soldiers who fought its wars, the farmers who fed its people, and the workers who built its monuments. Yet, they received few of the rewards. They wanted legal protections, relief from crushing debt, and access to political power. This deep-seated desire for justice and equality would become the driving force behind the most significant political changes in early Roman history, ultimately leading to the overthrow of the monarchy and the creation of a new political system. The final straw for the Roman people came not from a political decree, but from a deeply personal crime that crystallized all the hatred for King Tarquin the Proud and his family. The catalyst for the revolution was the rape of Lucretia, a virtuous and noble patrician woman, by the king's son, Sextus Tarquinius. After being assaulted, Lucretia summoned her husband and father, made them swear an oath to avenge her honor, and then took her own life. This tragic act was seen not just as a personal violation, but as an assault on the honor of all Rome and a symbol of the Tarquin family's lawlessness and tyranny. It was the spark that ignited the flames of rebellion. Led by a nobleman named Lucius Junius Brutus, who was a relative of Lucretia's husband, the enraged Roman aristocracy seized the moment. Brutus, who had supposedly feigned foolishness for years to avoid Tarquin's purges, delivered a fiery speech in the Forum, displaying Lucretia's body and denouncing the crimes of the royal family. He rallied the people, who were already weary of Tarquin's oppressive rule, and convinced them to rise up. The gates of Rome were closed, and the Senate, with popular support, passed a decree deposing and exiling Tarquin the Proud and his entire family. In 509 BCE, the age of kings in Rome came to a dramatic and violent end. Having expelled their king, the Romans were determined never again to place absolute power in the hands of a single individual. The very word rex, or king, became detestable to them. In its place, they established a new form of government they called res publica, which translates to the public thing or the public affair. This was the Roman Republic. Instead of a lifelong king, executive power was entrusted to two annually elected magistrates called consuls. These consuls held equal power, and each had the ability to veto the other's actions, a crucial check designed to prevent the rise of another tyrant. The Senate, composed of patricians, remained as an advisory body, but its influence grew immensely. The establishment of the Republic was a monumental turning point, but it did not immediately solve Rome's deep social divisions. In fact, the new system was at first an aristocratic republic, where power simply shifted from one king to the hands of the patrician class. The plebeians had helped overthrow the monarchy, but they were still excluded from holding office and making laws. The conflict of the orders would therefore continue and even intensify for the next 2 centuries. However, the creation of the Republic established a political framework within which the plebeians could fight for their rights. It was the beginning of a long, arduous journey toward a more inclusive and representative government, setting the stage for Rome's epic rise to power.